In this Outer Worlds 2 review, I'll share my impressions after finishing the game and playing for the past couple weeks. In this video, we'll take a look at whether Outer Worlds 2 is better than the original game. Is it worth a day one purchase? How long is the game and how much role-playing is there to be had? We'll answer all of these things and more. So we'll start with story and setting first. The game is set in the same universe, but a different system than the original title, and this time you will be visiting Arcadia. It feels a bit bigger, stranger, and more lived-in than Halcyon of the first game. You still get the boardrooms, neon outposts, and backwater colonies that define the series. The sequel builds its own patchwork of worlds with sharper faction identities and clearer reasons for why anyone would sign up with them in the first place once Earth goes silent. You'll encounter corporate believers, pious survivalists, cultists, opportunist prospectors, and authoritarian new governments. The result is a universe that leads less like a tropey punchline and more like a messy federation of clashing philosophies that can plausibly coexist, just like they do in the real world. This evolution lines up with how Obsidian positioned the sequel in early coverage, promising a deeper role-playing sandbox than the first outing, while retaining the trademark satire that the Outer Worlds is known for. The plot follows you, the player, as a commander with the Earth Directorate, a faction that wraps itself in the language of justice and order, while targeting what it labels authoritarian corporations and governments. The tone leans into comic book bravado, and the series humor is still right there in almost everything you interact with and do, including your reply options, the mission briefings, companion quips, and item flavor. You are awoken after 10 years of stasis in space to find Arcadia very different from what you remember. Corporations have merged and expanded, local governments have flourished into large authoritarian monoliths, and strange cults have taken over the minds of many. But the immediate danger are these mysterious rifts that could annihilate the whole system. Every power block interprets the threat in line with their worldview. Some claim prophecy, some smell profit, some see a once-in-a-lifetime chance to consolidate control. Your job is to broker peace or at least stop everything from collapsing while navigating those agendas and hopefully figure out what the right course of action is to survive this crisis. Now I say right, but it should be noted that the campaign does not force a single moral arc, so your experience of the main story may actually be rather different from other players, and there are significant and impactful decisions to be made that have devastating effects on the worlds you visit. In my opinion, The Outer Worlds 2 has a stronger commitment to open role-playing and build expression than its predecessor, and the full narrative follows suit by letting you author the pace and posture of your commander rather than marching down one narrow path. It never aims for the galactic opera scale of, let's say, Mass Effect, but it is an engaging thread that steadily pulls you across Arcadia and gives serviceable context to your exploration. The only real big downside to The Outer Worlds 2 is one that is also a major positive to the game, which is the satire and the humor of the game. These are one of the things that I think makes the game special and draws people to this title, but it's also one that has a negative impact because you have very gravity-shifting decisions to make throughout this game, and I think what happens is you simply don't care as much as you would if this was another role-playing game that didn't have that type of humor in it, because the game doesn't take itself too seriously, so you tend to not take it too seriously. So you don't get those emotional highs and emotional lows that you would get from a traditional role-playing game in The Outer Worlds 2. It's not that big of a deal, but it's worth noting. Moving on to the gameplay, we'll start with character creation. The game is immediately fun and sets a strong tone for the rest of the run. Background, traits, and early skill investment shape how you interact with Arcadia from the first hour. And honestly, I found the character creation of this game to be more in line with what I like in the Fallout games, particularly the older Fallout games. You have a lot of time you can spend in character creation looking through the skills and the traits and really figuring out like what sort of character that you want to play. And because the game features no respec, your choices are a lot more meaningful, although not crippling. If you enjoy that tension, of making the perfect build, you get to the first area and you realize, oh, maybe I should have taken this or should have taken that. You'll find that in this game. And I found myself a lot of times wishing I could start over and start the perfect character, which will add to replayability when I play in my second and third playthroughs. Progression spreads across skills, perks, and optional flaws, and almost every skill gets a use in the moment you arrive to the first town. Medicine changes outcomes of NPCs, hacking opens terminals and shortcuts, engineering repairs busted doors and power systems, and speech and leadership lets you push or finesse conversations. The Outer Worlds 2 does a much better job of implementing the use of skills throughout exploration and making you feel like they're all valuable and making decisions about which to pick much harder, in my opinion. And also, it does a fantastic job of incorporating them all into combat equally. And this is something that the first game didn't do as well. There were clearly combat-focused skills and non-combat focused skills. Every skill in this game has use outside of combat and inside of combat. So even if you take guns, for instance, and you think, oh, I'm just doing it for the range damage so I can be more effective in combat, you will have opportunities to interact with interactions in the game that use guns, so you can solve puzzles or you can solve dialogue dilemmas with that skill as well and help people out or not. And on top of that, I found the flaws system in the Outer Worlds 2 to be so much better than the first game. It's particularly engaging. There are a lot of unique flaws in this game that really sit there and make you look at the screen and decide if you want to take them or not. The first game, all that you ever did was not take flaws. Flaws were just never worth it in my estimation in the first game. There might be like one exception. But generally speaking, the flaws in the Outer Worlds 1 were not worth it in this game. Definitely took several flaws in my playthrough, and I probably would have taken several more if I felt a little more ambitious, and you will probably take some in your playthrough because they're just interesting. They change up your gameplay, and it is a welcome addition to the Outer Worlds. The gameplay loop of the Outer Worlds 2 is simple and satisfying. You talk to NPCs, listen to wire radios, be observant, pick up quests, and then set out to explore, fight, and then loot some more. What sells it is how often paying attention is rewarded. The game rarely spoon feeds. I had a great sequence where our resident was clearly without electricity. I followed the nearby poles to a silent substation, paired it with engineering, and restored the power, unlocked a safe that held a collectible I needed for an entirely different quest, and there were no journal updates or waypoints for any of this, just a chain of obvious clues that the game trusted me to notice and do something about. That's not to say that every quest or every interaction in the game is like that, but having interactions that work out that way is a harken back to a better time of gaming, in my opinion, and it was nice to see a little bit in this game. Another thing that I really appreciated in the Outer Worlds 2 when it comes to dialogue is that reading terminals and hearing people when you talk to them in dialogues actually does work for you in later dialogues. You have dialogue options that you cannot select if you have not found the relevant data, whether it's a data log on the ground, or a corpse that you need to be loot that had a note on it, or someone you should have talked to before you talk to this person. Doing the homework of exploring the universe actually provides you with positive outcomes when you use that data to help you get the result that you want, which is really, really nice. Talking about combat and gear, combat in this game is about the same as the original, maybe slightly more refined in my estimation, just based on the equipment and a little bit more abilities that you can use in the field. But there are a lot of different types of weapons you can use in this game, from handguns to long guns, heavy weapons, science weapons, melee weapons. And the mod system really invites creativity in terms of like how you want to play and, you know, like what sort of build you want to go for. I actually took a perk that made it so if I used all the gear from one brand, then I actually got damage and armor, which was really fun. So a lot of my playthrough was spent not only managing the gear that I had, but also making sure I was always wearing Auntie's Choice gear in order to gain as much damage as I could. It could have been a different brand, didn't have to be that one, but it was really fun trying to navigate that. And so I do think that the armor and weapon system of the game is pretty solid. You're finding lots of new weapons as you play throughout the game. I think you will eventually light on a couple of weapons that work well for you, but there is some experimentation there, even though it's not like as crazy as some games out there. It's got enough there that you can tinker with it and really find something that feels like your own. Talking about companions, they can't be romanced in the game, which I personally find to be a shame. I wish that was part of this game. Some of my favorite games of all time, you can romance your companions. And I always find that it adds a more of a entertainment element to these games as you become more invested in your relationships with them. And when you don't have potential romance dynamic, that tends to be not the case, which is true for me. But generally speaking, I feel like the companions were stronger in the Outer Worlds 2 than they were 1, not only in terms of voice acting and dialogue, even though I love Max and Pravati, don't get me wrong, but the companions in this game feel more fleshed out. The ways that they improve their personal quest lines feel better. In short, I just feel like the companions were better realized in this game. They actually feel more like companions. They talk while you walk around. They are actually deadly in combat, and they can actually put in work for you. So I think the companions was a step up from the first game for sure. Much like the first game, the sequel is story forward with lots of people to talk to and things to find, but it respects player agency as well. There's fast travel, there are readable maps, and sensible autosaves reduce friction without solving puzzles for you. The UI stays out of your way most of the time, and most importantly, the game lets obvious solutions actually be solutions. If you notice a cable, follow it. If you find an unlocked terminal, try it. If you learned a name in a log, use it in conversation. The design trusts you to connect dots, which makes exploration and completionism very satisfying. So moving along to visual, audio, and performance, I played on both Xbox Series X and PC. I had a Windows store code, so I could actually play on both, and my save would go back and forth, which is quite nice. The PC build looks cleaner and sharper, as you might expect, but the art style does a lot of the heavy lifting on both platforms. The worlds are colorful and original. They look better than the original game, in my opinion. I think they did a better job of realizing these worlds, but they have that pulpy space western vibe really working, and I really like that. On the Series X in performance mode, I saw grass animation pop in at short range, and the resolution of my character model on the menu screens looked a bit soft. But other than that, I wasn't too bothered about it. It looked pretty good on Xbox Series X. The frame rate was a solid 60, I'd say 99% of the time, and it generally played very, very smoothly on the Series X while I was playing. The PC, I pushed settings higher and got the expected payoff in clarity and effects with stable performance during my long play sessions. I was playing at 4K on high settings. I don't know, I was getting somewhere probably around 100 FPS while I was playing. It played really, really well, very, very smoothly. And on Xbox Series X, I preferred the performance mode for the consistent frame rate, but loading was reasonably short on both platforms, like I think it was maybe 5 to 10 seconds tops. And the quick travel didn't create any lag in my game, and I only ran into one crash the whole time that I played. So that's pretty good. And overall, the game feels pretty well optimized for its specs, which is, unfortunately not that common this day and age. So I have no doubt, no matter whether you're playing on PC, whether you're playing on Xbox or even PlayStation 5 and Xbox tend to play similarly usually, you should have pretty good performance on this game. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is varied and fun. Old school tracks mingle with more modern themes depending on what you chose to listen to and where you are in the world. The voice acting of the game is strong across the board. It may not be the top of the industry, but it's up there. It's very well done. And I didn't hit the Oblivion repeat problem where one actor is overused that you start picking them out of every crowd, so that was nice. Companions land their lines, vendors sound distinct, and incidental chatter sells each location without turning grating over long sessions. So overall, I was very, very happy with the audio of this game. It's definitely one of the highlights. When it comes to replayability and price point, The Outer Worlds 2 is very replayable and deserves recognition for listening to player feedback from the first game. There are a good variety of builds worth trying in combat. I could say there's probably at least half a dozen builds you could play this game through before you start to kind of overlap on each other. And there are over 138 different ending slides, so there are lots of different ways you can resolve outcomes in this game, meaning everyone will probably not have the same exact ending as anyone else, which is pretty cool. This game took me about 35 hours to complete, and this was not a completionist run, mind you. I was definitely towards the end itching to see the ending of the game and get done, so I bypassed some of the side quests as I got later on in the game. I think you could probably get 50 hours out of this game easy if you went and did a completionist playthrough and explored it, and if you're talking about multiple playthroughs with different builds and different endings, you could push this well over 80 hours or 100 hours, depending on how much you really like the game. So I think from that standpoint, this is in a very good place. There was initial pushback when Microsoft floated this game for $79.99. We actually put out a video saying, is it worth that? Not long after that, they reduced the price of this game to $69.99. So that is the official price tag for this. You can also get this day one on Game Pass for PC and Ultimate, and it kind of softens the blow if you already have these, or if you want to play this but you don't want to pay $69.99. I definitely would recommend an easy play if you have Game Pass. This is a no-brainer. Go play it. $69.99, I think it's still worth it, in my opinion, even at that price. It is a pretty polished product, whereas the Outer Worlds 1 I thought was more of a AA experience. The Outer Worlds 2 feels much, much closer to a AAA experience, and I enjoyed my time with it. So I think you could probably still get it at that price and be okay if you want. Obviously, if you want to get it on sale, you probably should, even if it's just $10, $20 off. So final thoughts on The Outer Worlds 2. It's basically a better Outer Worlds in almost every single way. The story and setting, I think, is as good or better. The gameplay is a refinement of the mechanics seen in the first game, and the role-playing really, really shines. It's at the forefront of The Outer Worlds 2. You can sit there and read the dialogue options and come out with all kinds of different outcomes for each quest, and some of them are not even huge quests. There are just so many different ways to resolve things that if you wanted to see every ending slide of this game, it would take you hundreds and hundreds of hours in order to figure out exactly how to navigate it. It's really, really well done. And the combat is good enough to get you through the whole game. It's not the best combat I've ever played, but it's certainly not the worst either. And between that and the role-playing, I would highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of these types of role-playing games and is, looking for something that isn't necessarily new, but if it isn't broken, don't fix it, except maybe polish it a little bit. So that wraps up our Outer Worlds 2 review, and I hope you guys got something out of it. I apologize if I don't sound quite myself in this video. I've been sick for about a week or so my voice sounds a little bit different, and I have a little bit less energy than I normally would, but I made it through the game anyway, still had fun playing it. But I want to know what you guys think. Are you guys looking forward to playing the Outer Worlds 2? Are you going to be picking it up on Game Pass day one? Or are you just pre-ordering it? Let me know in the comments below.